Welcome to week 7 of the college football season, and I wanted to use the unabated pick'em tool to add a little bit more excitement to a few different afternoon games on Saturday in the college football world. All right, so specifically, I'm looking at Oregon and Washington and Iowa, Wisconsin. Able to come in here and just select which games I'm thinking about or all of them, and then take a look at underdog versus prize picks as my option. So I'm a big underdog fantasy player. So taking a look at these two games, I'm able to see what kind of edges there are for these four teams. A couple of recent injuries in the last few weeks have made some of these lines really interesting to me, specifically starting at the top here with Jalen Polk. So, receiver 3 for Washington, high powered offense that loves to throw and does it really, really well. One of the top offenses, at least from a passing perspective in college football. He's kind of been used more recently because Jalen McMillan, their receiver 1B, has been injured. Well, he should be returned. I think he would have played last week if it was against a tougher opponent, but I think he's playing against Oregon, and that makes this line a really good one for us here. 78 and a half yards on Underdog Fantasy. The projection for us is 55.6, so we have a little bit of room to work with. He's not really necessarily a large, like a big play guy or a boom or bust type option. He's just a very quality receiver. But Michael Penix loves throwing to his top two guys, Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan. So I love this play here of the lower receiving yards. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's some low risk because I know how big of a game this is against a top 10 opponent in Oregon. I would be really shocked if Jalen McMillan doesn't play. And then kind of looking at Dylan Johnson, the running back for Washington, when these teams play in these huge games, they really start to filter and funnel everything to their studs. Dylan Johnson's a really good running back that came from Mississippi State last year, was used obviously in the Mike Leach offense that doesn't really focus on the run game. And so he was kind of overlooked. He goes to Washington. He's really been pretty good. We have him at about 50% of carries. So not shockingly, we do like the over here. And this is a pretty large edge at over 27.5%. So looking at the other side of the field, right? We're looking at some of these plays from Washington. Obviously, we can't just do Washington plays. A guy like Terrence Ferguson's interesting. The edge is here at 23.3%. But the line is pretty close. I don't know if I necessarily would put this in my parlay. It is very close. This is one of those things where he gets about 10% of targets. We're looking at maybe 3, maybe 4 targets. And Bo Nix is a super capable quarterback for Oregon. Those passes are good passes. They're quality attempts. So this number is a little bit of a one I'm a little bit not so confident on, even with this larger number. I might maybe come back to it if I need like a fifth option here. I talked about other injuries, right? Well, I guess real quick, we can stay on this Washington game. Jeremy Bernard, Michigan State transfer, he's looked pretty good. He's even been used in the run game, even though he's a receiver. This is another one where if you think that McMillan's back, this is another nice one to put into your parlay because he becomes now a fourth option in that offense. Now it's a very good option, or a very good offense, but not necessarily one that's going to hammer a fourth receiver. They're really going to funnel those targets to the top two, maybe Polk at worst. So maybe you don't feel confident in Polk. You can remove that one and add Bernard. And you're thinking those top 3 guys are going to get all of those targets in this big matchup. But I think personally, all 3 of them make a ton of sense. Looking at Wisconsin, this offense lost Ches Malusi, kind of their running back 1B. Going into last week's matchup against Rutgers, we didn't necessarily get to see what the full offense is going to look like because they just controlled the game from the start. But I think a guy like Braylon Allen isn't going to get the huge usage that we thought he might. Jackson Acker, who actually is down here as a slight over edge, he's going to get some carries. He ran at a pretty decent bet. I think we have him at around 25, 30% of usage compared to Braylon Allen, who's in like the mid 40s. Now, Braylon Allen can break off a big run, but I actually really kind of like this under. Iowa's defense is very quality. It's going to be a slow, sloppy game. Iowa might run 35, 40 plays, and if that happens, this could just be a slow, grinded out type performance. I'm just curious. I don't know if Allen's going to be able to break off a big one against the Iowa defense compared to maybe like a Rutgers or Michigan State or someone like that. So I do like this play. Looking at receivers, they've kind of used a bunch of different guys. When looking at the Wisconsin props that are out there with Rucci, the tight end, and maybe some of the other receivers, see some lines pop up like a CJ Williams or Skylar Bell. We have a Will Pauling one right here. The reason why they kind of rate the way they do is they're just so hard to predict. Will Pauling was getting maybe 3 to 5 targets a game, and last week he had something like 12 or 13 at least, which was a little bit odd just because of how everything is played. But that's just kind of how that inconsistent nature of that passing attack. So I do like the receptions here. He looked very good. Tanner Mordecai was made some really good passing attempts to him. So I do think that connection is strong. But speaking to these other guys like the Ruccis, maybe the other receivers, I wouldn't go under on all of them. Like if their lines start to pop up and those are nice edges, you kind of have to, you maybe want to use them individually in unique parlays. I think largely they're strong plays on the under because the lines are going to be decent enough where those unders can hit. But I wouldn't necessarily hammer one, or I should say maybe 2 or 3 all over the place in the same parlay. I would spread those out. I do like Pauling, like I said, but all year long I've been talking about Iowa unders. So this passing attack is just gruesomely bad, just awful, right? Cade McNamara goes down with injury. Deacon Hill comes in. He actually played at Wisconsin, or at least was a backup, and he's just not really been all that great. And all he's done is funnel targets to the Iowa tight end, specifically Eric All. This is the one over I would go. Tight ends and overs at Iowa are just like a common theme. You think about all the tight ends that have come from them in the past 5-10 years. It's insane. All is a Michigan transfer who is very solid tight end. This 41.5 line and his reception number was pretty appealing as well. It might have been taken down already. I think it was at 3.5, but this 41.5 line is appealing to me. I think he could see easily 35-40% of targets, and we have him at that 35 number. He could even see 50% of targets. The problem is, Deacon Hill is just not a good quarterback. His line's 125.5. So I don't know if, even though I know this line is just, it's 125.5 for a Big Ten quarterback. That's just insane. I don't know if I would hit it. I think Eric All is a guy I like. I like kind of the under on like a Deontay Vines, who's right here. He's just another random receiver for Iowa. They use maybe Nico Reganey, Seth Anderson, and then this Deontay Vines as options out wide, maybe like Caleb Brown sporadically. So I do think an under like this makes sense, even though the line is so small. He might get 1-2 targets max, and it's from Deacon Hill, not necessarily a guy like Bo Nix, where you can almost assure one of those 2 targets are going to be catches. So I think those unders in the Iowa make sense, except for Eric All. I like the over here. Deacon Hill at that number is just crazy to think about, but there it is. Look at it real quickly. Some random options. Gary Bryant, Oregon, big game. You wonder how much they start to utilize a smaller core of guys. Gary Bryant's kind of that second or third option. He plays a ton of snaps. So I think this over makes some sense. If you get on the field consistently, they might keep that rotation really short between him, Troy Franklin, I think Terrence Ferguson out wide at tight end, maybe like a Tez Johnson type. So lots of targets potentially coming his way. And then, of course, Jalen McMillan, who we talked about earlier, 90.5 yards is a really significant number. We have him pretty close to that. I don't know if I would necessarily touch this one. Coming off an injury, there's always the concern of, does he get banged up and miss time? Does he lose rhythm? The under makes a little bit of sense just because of how aggressive that number is, but I definitely wouldn't go any sort of over, as I think there's just some concerns of potentially, he's going to be full strength, I think, but tweaking, re-injuring the previous injury, the under could make sense if you wanted to play it that way. I'm just going to stay away with the number being so tight and this being such a big game. But hoping you found this interesting. This underrated pick'em tool, super useful for prize picks and underdog, understanding the edges that are out there and how maybe some correlation can help you out as these edges do change as you add them to your parlay on the right. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You can get a 5-day free trial going into this big weekend of college football. Use the code SMIZZ, SMIZZ, to check it out. Thanks, guys.